Live from the KDAL studios at Lake and Superior Street in downtown Duluth, it's Stars Over the Prairie with 8-time Minnesota Music Award winner Paul Metsa.
And I wish I could see stars over the prairie, stars over the prairie tonight.
Featuring cool people from all walks of life. Check out previous show podcasts at KDAL610.com. The phone lines are open at 218-722-0839. Now, here's Paul Metsa.
And I wish I could see stars over the prairie, stars over the prairie tonight.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the Northland and wherever you're springing from all over the world. This is Paul Metsa, host of Stars Over the Prairie, broadcasting on KDAL 610 AM and 103.9 FM, streaming live on KDAL610.com. We've got a very Dylan-centric day here as we live and broadcast 237 summer slopes down the hill from Bob Dylan's childhood home. And we've got just a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. People ask, what do you do there, Metsa, on Stars Over the Prairie? I go, well, we interview stars, people that used to be stars, people that want to be stars, people that never were stars, people that just like to go outside at night with a cold one and looking at the stars. And we cover the waterfront. Like the man just said, cool people from all walks of life in all 50 states. We've got a great show today. We're going to be speaking with author Peter Mackenzie. Let's play. So we've got Peter Mackenzie coming up. I met him for the first time last night. He was recommended to me by a great blogger here in town, Ed Newman, who writes a great blog called Any Men's Blog. I highly recommend that. And we're going to talk about how a young Bobby Dylan lived with my guest, Peter Mackenzie, and his mom and dad not long after he got to New York. But let's listen to a little early Bob Dylan here playing Fixin' to Die off his first record before we bring Peter on.
Feeling funny in my mind, Lord, I believe I'm fixin' to die. Feeling funny in my mind, Lord, I believe I'm fixin' to die. Well, I don't mind dying, but I hate to leave my children crying. Well, look over yonder to that burying ground. Look over yonder to that burying ground.
All right, that was Bob Dylan on his very first record playing Fixin' to Die. And we've got a man that might have heard Bob rehearsing that in his parents' apartment out in New York City. He put out a great book, highly recommended, called On a Couch and 50 Cents a Day, talking about the early days of Bob Dylan in New York City and how Bob was kind of an older brother to him. Bob Dylan says this about Peter Mackenzie's mom and dad. Even Mac Mackenzie said, "It's even Mac Mackenzie. They took me in, and they were beautiful. I lived with them, and they fed me, and I stayed out all hours, came back in and went to sleep on the couch." And Peter was there. I was his idol. Now he's 18, 19. He's in college. He's a very smart kid. They know me well. Talk to them. That was Bob Dylan in 1965. And now we've got Peter Mackenzie in 2025. Peter, how are you this morning?
I'm fine. And we're correct. Fixin' to Die, he did play it at the house. And he played it. There was a gathering, Thanksgiving 1961, with a whole bunch of people from the University of Chicago and other friends of my parents. And Bob came with Susie Rodolo. But before everybody got there, Bob was the first one to show up by himself. My mother asked him, "Where's Susie?" He said she'll be in later. And he had a tape recorder, which Bob was interested in. So I had never really used it before. So I turned it on, and I played a few chords. We listened to it back, and Bob said, "Well, wow, that sounds pretty good. You mind if I try something?" And guess what he did? He played Fixin' to Die.
Oh, that's a perfect choice to begin this interview with Peter Mackenzie.
Yes, it just so happens. And we still have the tapes. And his rendition of Fixin' to Die, as well as all the other songs that he recorded, House of the Rising Sun, and San Francisco Bay Blues, and You're No Good, and a couple of others. They, believe it or not, because he was so relaxed, they actually dwarf the renditions on his first album.
Wow.
Which is interesting because he had just recorded his first album on the 20th and the 22nd of 1961.
Wow.
And this was the 23rd. And I've always maintained if they ever do a re-release of his first album, they should replace all the tracks with the tracks that were recorded at the house, because he's never sung that way before or since. It's just unbelievable. Not only that, it also shows he has a beautiful voice. The voice that you hear on stage throughout the years, from even the beginning, that's a stage voice. That's not his natural voice. He can sing. When he wants to sing, he can sing. But it's a character that's on stage. Always has been. He's completely different in person. He's very funny. He's very affable. He's a caring guy. He listens to what you have to say. And it was great when he was with us. He used to give me all sorts of advice whenever I had problems with my compatriots, schoolmates, or whatnot. So the real Bob Dylan, the Bob Dylan that everybody wants to know, but nobody has gotten to know him because everybody sees him in public, that's really what the book was about. And it was about, and the book is about also, in great part due to my parents and him staying at the house for that extended period of time, putting his head on the pillow that my mother flipped up for him every night on the couch. Waking up in the morning, she made him breakfast, and they discussed the events of the day and who he was meeting and whatnot. And I'll get to discussing my father later.
I have Peter. I've got to ask you though. Do you still have the physical copy of that tape?
Yes, I do. There are 4 of them.
I hope it's in a safe place.
It is, but believe me, they're all safe, sound, locked away.
Yeah.
And you're right. My wife is saying yes, in an undisclosed location. It's true. Yeah, somewhere in Iceland. Fortunately, it's not Greenland that Trump's trying to take over now. It's in Iceland, so he can't get at them. Nobody can get at them.
Well, Iceland will be next if he gets Greenland, but.
Well, all right. Well, if he gets Greenland, I'll fly over to Iceland personally and take the tapes away. So it's no problem.
Now, tell us a little bit about Peter Mackenzie, about your mom and dad. To take a stranger in. What did they do, and how did they meet the young Bob?
Okay. Well, I'll give you the basic story, which is the introduction and first chapter of the book, which is a good thing because it'll give most people an introduction to the way it's happening. We didn't have a television, and the brownstone we lived in is 5 stories. The bottom floor was commercial, the second floor was commercial, and then there were 6 apartments front and back. We lived in apartment 4R, which was on the 4th floor in the back. And downstairs was a photographer named Howard Harrison. who had a girlfriend named Anne Marie Ivan. And she looked like she was a dead ringer for Joan Baez. I can get into that in another time. The book discusses it quite a bit, but it was a big deal. And all the guys in the village were crazy about Anne Marie.
What was that? Excuse me, Peter. What was your exact address? It
was 10 West 28th Street,
okay,
New York.
Sure.
And
right off Fifth Avenue, right?
Yeah, right off Fifth Avenue. You know, Bob even mentions it in his, in the quote that you gave, but he also mentions it in that great poem, My Life in a Stolen Minute, that was on the program on April 12, 1963, his first major concert at Town Hall, when he wrote the poem. And there are a couple of lines in there when he talks about my parents and staying at 10 West 28th Street. So, yeah. Anyway, we didn't have a TV. The neighbor, Anne Marie and Howard were out for the night. I went downstairs, and I was watching this movie. And those are the days where they let all the doors open.
Sure.
They didn't lock them.
In New York City, right?
Yeah, it's a completely different spot. And all of a sudden, there's this knock on the door, and this, medium height guy walked in with a pair of cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. And he said, is Anne Marie here? I said, no, she's not. And I don't know when she's going to be back. Oh, my name is Peter McKenzie, by the way. And he said, oh, my name's Jack Elliott.
Huh.
I said, oh, well, nice to meet you. I had my guitar downstairs. He asked me if I played the guitar. I said, sure. I've been playing the guitar about a month and a half. So I picked it up, going to impress, what I thought was a country bumpkin. Played the two chords that I knew.
Sure.
Sang part of the song. Very impressed with myself. Remember, I was 15. And
sure.
What did I know? So he said, well, I play a little bit myself. Took the guitar, and it was almost impossible to see where his fingers went. I mean, they went up and down the fretboard so fast. And in any case, he said, well, do you know when Anne Marie is going to be back? And I said, no, but, my parents might. Why didn't you go upstairs? So that's what he did. And as soon as he found out who my father was, that was it. They spent hours talking because my father had been one of the founders of the National Maritime Union,
wow.
of which Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie and Cisco Houston were members. And they all looked up to my dad. So they got into a whole discussion about unions, about Woody, and all that stuff. And we basically made a friend for life. We couldn't keep him away. Jack would keep dropping up, and he was just a great guy.
Yeah. I've hung out with him. He just one of the greatest storytellers I've ever met in my life.
He's unbelievable.
Yeah, he's unbelievable.
I mean, he's a national treasure.
Yeah, he is.
And my parents loved him. I loved him. He was just great. And I even wound up singing at his wedding. That's a whole other story, which we'll go into maybe at another time.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that sounds like we got to hear that at some point.
Yeah, that is a good story. In any case, he told my parents that he was going to be giving a concert at Carnegie Chapter Hall on the 16th, 8 days from then. Would they like to come? And my parents said, sure, we'll come. Now, that's going to be the next story after this one.
Sure.
I'm down at the apartment again 2 days later, watching another program. And there's a knock on the door. And this guy comes in. He's about 6'2", and he acts like he's Frank Sinatra. Hey, Anne Marie there? Where is she? I mean, his name was Kevin Crown. Now,
sure,
Kevin Crown.
I know that. I've heard that name.
Yeah, we can discuss that again another time. But he was Bob's first unofficial manager. Terry Saul was Bob's first official manager.
Right.
But Kevin had met Bob 6 months earlier, and Bob had stayed with Kevin in Chicago for a couple of weeks before they all decided to come to New York together. Now, Kevin and Mark Eastman, another friend from the University of Chicago, came to New York. Bob came, I guess, on a different car, but they all had agreed to meet up at a certain time in New York. They all came at the same time, and they met up. And the day after, or 2 days after they met up, Kevin, Mark, and Bob went directly out to see Woody at the Greystone Hospital in New Jersey. Bob had already written, contrary to popular belief, Bob had already written Song to Woody in Chicago when he was staying with Kevin, and he sang Song to Woody that first night, and that basically cemented the relationship between Woody and Bob. That's a fact. That's how it happened. Most people don't know it because, no one else was there. But Bob told me the story. Kevin told me the story. Mark Eastman told me the story. After Bob eventually came over to the house for the first time. Now, go to February 16th. Are you following me?
Yes, I'm following you directly, Peter, and I'm loving it. Let's do this. Let us take a little break, and then we're going to be back for the whole rest of the hour with Peter Mackenzie. He's written a great book, including all these stories he's kind enough to share with us. Feel free to order several copies off Amazon. It's called On a Couch and 50 cents a day. We'll be back with Peter Mackenzie after these breaks.
I'm Joe, and I had Z-LASIK at Weiss Eye Center. The funny thing is I absolutely hated buying a contact solution because I thought it was such a racket having to spend $15 on a bottle of contact solution. And that's just one thing, is just not having to buy that stuff anymore, or glasses or anything like that. For me, it's mainly just I like to hunt and fish and everything, and not having to bring that stuff along, especially in the winter when I go ice fishing and stuff. It gets a pain when I get to the end of the day taking my contacts out, and then if a rattle reel goes off in the middle of the night, I'm fumbling for my glasses to go and try and catch a fish.
Weiss Eye Center is the only clinic to offer blade-free Z-LASIK in the Northland. To find out more and to arrange your free consultation, call 218-625-1917 today or visit weisseyecenter.com for more information. Weiss Eye Center. See the best.
Chum's 20th Annual Rhubarb Festival is taking place on Saturday, June 28th. Through all things rhubarb, the Rhubarb Festival raises money for Chum and its services, supporting people in Duluth who are experiencing homelessness. This includes rhubarb refreshments, such as pies, ice cream, burritos, and brats, music and entertainment, and rhubarb-themed activities for the whole family to enjoy. The festival is from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. on June 28th at Asbury United Methodist Church in West Duluth. For more information, please visit Chum's website at chumduluth.org/rhubarb.
Gray Wolf Lodge, located on gorgeous Pelican Lake in beautiful Orr, is the great getaway in northern Minnesota. Featuring affordable, modernized cabins that rent by the week or even a few days, Gray Wolf Lodge is your place to treat the family or just yourself for a relaxing time away from it all. With great fishing, yoga classes, massage, boat rentals, a sandy beach, a common gathering area with a fire pit, and the gorgeous and rustic Gray Wolf Lodge, hosts John and Carol have thought of everything for your unforgettable stay. Give them a call at 1-800-840-9653 or go to graywolflodge.com to see all that they have to offer. Gray Wolf Lodge, your home away from home in the North Woods.
If you're looking for a great hang in downtown Duluth, I highly suggest Carmody's Irish Pub. They're located at 308 East Superior Street, open Tuesday through Sunday. The host and hostess are Eddie and Liz. Eddie is a retired Chicago cop. If he happens to be in the club when you're there, talk to him. He's got more stories than I do. They've also got a great jam session every Tuesday night from 8 to 11 with Bruce Woodman. So if you're a musician, tried and true, that is out there playing and just want to go try out some new stuff, go down and hang out with Bruce and the crew. Or if you're just up and coming, bring your horn or your stringed instrument or just want to sing. Go sit in with Bruce Woodman every Tuesday night at Carmody's Pub, 308 East Superior Street.
You're invited to the Great Lakes Candy Kitchen, open for another season for all your candy pleasure. They're located on Scenic Highway 61, 10 miles north of Duluth in Knife River. They're third and fourth generation candy makers using traditional copper kettles to make their caramels, fudge brittles, and chocolate-dipped hot air. When you visit Great Lakes Candy Kitchen, be sure and try their famous Nutty Ice Cream Bar. Tell them you heard it on Stars Over the Prairie. Great Lakes Candy Kitchen, located just 10 miles north of Duluth in Knife River.
River City Records and Books, voted Best Record Store of 2023 in the Twin Ports by the Duluth Reader, has in stock thousands of new and used vinyl records, from classic rock to punk, grunge, and metal, to hip-hop, rap, and jazz, reggae, and dub. Thousands of books, CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray, and VHS. Also a large selection of cassettes, comic books, and music magazines. Stop in and see them at 1814 West Superior Street in the friendly Lincoln Park Craft District. Open 9 to 7, 7 days a week.
Every day deserves a superior beer. Earth Rider Brewery's decorated brewers hand-select hops that lend citrus notes to the crisp and easy-drinking Superior Pale Ale. Visit Earth Rider Brewery's Cedar Lounge Taproom on the Working Harbor in Superior for their award-winning flagship and seasonal brews on tap and to go. To find out much more about Earth Rider Brewery events, join the mailing list and locate Earth Rider Beer near you at earthrider.beer. Hold fast.
Hi, this is Liberace with my good friend Liza Minnelli.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, I didn't see you there. You can listen to us on Stars Over the Prairie with Paul Metsa on KDAL.
I'm out here 1,000 miles from my home, walking a road other men have gone down. I'm seeing your world of people and things. Here paupers and peasants and princes and kings.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Stars Over the Prairie. I'm your host, Paul Metsa. That was a young Bob Dylan who wrote that a little bit before he met Woody Guthrie. And according to my guest, Peter McKenzie, played that for Woody in one of his first meetings. Did you ever hear? Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, the reason I know he sang it, aside from being told that, is I came into the possession through Kevin Crown after Kevin died of the original typed out with handwritten corrections of Song to Woody that he wrote in Chicago.
Wow.
It's now in the Morgan Library, safe and sound in the Dylan collection. And basically what they did back then was, for copyright purposes, after it was written, typed out with all the corrections, Kevin and Bob put it in an envelope, and they addressed it back to Kevin's address. And when the letter came back, they never opened it. That's how
right.
you save money copyright. So that's what happened. It went back to Kevin, and Kevin held on to it. And it's actually featured in No Direction Home when Bob Dylan is singing Song to Woody. They show the image of that draft in the back, in the background while you hear Bob's voice singing.
Wow!
So I was, and there are several other pieces that I have or had that are in the Bob Dylan scrapbook. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes, I am. So, we only have about 15 minutes, and we're going to have you on again. So tell us real quick, Peter McKenzie.
Let me finish the story. Well, let me finish the story first about the concert.
Oh, yeah, right. I apologize.
This is the way it happened. After the concert was over, Jack said, "We're all going down to Gertie's Folk City." Said to my mom and dad, "Do you want to come?" And they said, "Okay." He said, a friend of mine is playing, Cisco Houston. Oh, it turns out Cisco Houston was a very good friend of my dad's, and my dad hadn't seen him in about 16 years.
Wow.
Because he was a member of the union. They were friends. So they went down to Gertie's Folk City to see Cisco Houston. No, I wasn't there, but my mother called me up and said, "You better get down here. Jack wants to see you, and your dad wants to see you. Come on down." I went down. I sat at a table. Across the table was Margie Guthrie and Arlo Guthrie. He was 14, a year younger than I was. So we're sitting there. Cisco was talking to my father at the bar, and sandwiches come to the table. And I was hungry. I'm about to have a sandwich, and this huge waft of smoke comes across the table. I didn't like cigarette smoke. In any case, I turned around to see who the culprit was, and it was this guy with a little hat on and a long coat, chain smoking, with a drink in his hand. So I figured, all right, it'll soon stop. I'll get to eat my sandwich. As I was about to take a bite again, same waft of smoke came across. So now I was really pissed. I was going to turn and tell him either to leave or stop, when Margie said to me, "Oh, Pete, I see you've noticed our friend, Bob Dylan. He's from New Mexico." Well, I was screwed right then and there. There's nothing I could do. And then my mother took a look at him and said, "Gee, he's so lean, and he's drinking and has no food." She takes the plate of sandwich. She asks him, "Were you hungry?" And he sort of goes, She takes the entire plate of sandwiches, including the one I was about to eat, hands it to him, eats everything, including my sandwich.
Hungry man.
Mumbled. Yeah.
Hungry young man.
I know. Anyway, when the night was over and we left, my attitude was, I hope I never see this guy again. It would be, a cold day in hell before I'd ever want to see this guy again. And of course, when the first time that I got to speak to him, met him, I fell in love with him. That's when Kevin brought him up to the apartment almost a month later, and boom. And the minute he walked into the apartment, he knew what was in that apartment, my dad and my mom. And 2 months later, he was living with us.
Wow.
And that was it. So, but the book's a lot more nuanced than that. It really gives you the whole essence of and reasons why it happened. But the main thing that the book deals with is the influence my parents had on him. When he walked in the door, he was little Bob Dylan, all in lowercase letters. When he left 28th Street, he was big Bob Dylan, all caps.
Wow.
The transition, that's the real story of a complete unknown, period. And no one knows that. No one ever talked to me before. And I realized that at a certain point, since nobody was, and of course the opening quote from Bob, well, if anybody was going to tell the story, it better be me before either of us kick the bucket.
Right.
I mean, Bob's 4.5 years older than I am. He's 83 now, going to be 84 in a couple of months. My birthday's in December. I'm 79. Had just turned 15 when I saw Bob or met Bob the first time. He was 19, just about to turn 20. So that's how it worked out. So that's just the real story. If you want to know the influence of how Bob Dylan really became Bob Dylan, what were the keys that unlocked that certain part of his brain and got the gears turning, that's what this book is about, and you can't find it anywhere else except maybe, of course, with Susie Rodolo's book, A Freewheel in Time. She was a great gal. She was like an older sister to me. Hers is a terrific book. You put those two together, throw in Chronicles, and that's all you need. That'll tell you who Bob Dylan is, and then the rest, just listen to his songs.
We're speaking with Peter Mackenzie. The book he's talking about is the one he penned, called On a Couch and 50 Cents a Day. So, Peter, how long did Bob live with the Mackenzie family?
About 4.5 months.
Okay.
But while he was living with us, before he lived with us, after the first night in mid-March, he kept dropping up all the time. In fact, if you remember his famous book that Dave Whitaker cajoled him to get,
Bound for Glory,
which he carried everywhere with him, that was sacrosanct. I mean, he lived by that book. On April 21st, 1961, in the middle of his first appearance at Gertie's, backing John Lee Hooker, there's a great story in the book about that. He dropped by the apartment with his Bound for Glory book and gave it to my family. He wanted me to read it, but he knew he couldn't give it to me directly because that would be kind of interfering with how my, the basic pecking order of who got to say what in the household. So he gave it to my mother. And my mother laughed. She laughed. I mean, she knew everything in the book, and he knew she would never read it. But he said, yeah, you read it. It's a real revelation about life. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there listening to this with my tongue hanging out. And the minute Bob left, I got the book and spent all night reading it. And I got to tell you, I loved the book. Not sure whether it was because it was a great book or because it was Bob's, but that's the story.
Well, it is a great book. There was, I got to know Diamond Dave Whitaker about 6 years ago. There was a meeting of a bunch of old Dinkytown folks. And, of course, it was Diamond Dave who not only got Woody Guthrie's Bound for Glory to Bob, but he, with another guy by the name of David Morton, who you might have heard of, Peter, were the two guys that drove Bob Dylan to the edge of Minneapolis when he grabbed his guitar and started hitchhiking to New York in January. And like I like to say, and I've heard it from both Morton and Whitaker. And so when I write the prequel to A Complete Unknown, that is how I'm going to end my prequel. And then you haven't seen A Complete Unknown yet. You'll see how it opens. But anyway, Whitaker is a character still alive. He's out in San Francisco. He's probably 85 or 86 now. Still a member of the radical hippie Rainbow family, and just really an incredible guy. So I gotta ask you, really minutiae here. Did your mom do Bob's laundry?
Yes.
Now that is a mother for you.
Oh yeah. No, he actually, at one point, he actually asked her to be his stepmom.
Really?
And, yeah, she just looked at him, almost cross-eyed, and she laughed because she was already doing that.
Yeah.
She was being like his mom, and my dad was being like his dad. And I'll never forget the time Kevin and Bob were sitting in the living room towards the end of his stay. And he out of nowhere, Bob says, "Eve, would you be my manager?" And anyway, because she has a whole background in show business. She was a dance with Martha Graham. She traveled all over.
Really?
All over.
Interesting.
Yeah, in her youth. And she just said to him, "Bob, I'm really flattered, but, it's a very specialized field. There are a lot of other people that would be much better than I at doing it. They're pros, so stick with them." And what was very interesting was a couple months later, or about 4 months later, Bob called her up and said, "Eve, there's this guy that wants to manage me. Should I go with him?" And my wife, or my mother said, "What's his name?" His name's Albert Grossman. He seems to know a lot of people. And my mother said to him, "Well, he just had the big review in the New York Times. You're sort of like a big fish in a little pond right now. That's going to fade. So do a little research. If you like what you see, go with him." And Kevin did a little research on Albert Grossman and got back to Mom, and it got back to Bob, that this guy was the real deal.
Yeah, well, he's big in he's big in Chicago. Grossman was.
Yeah. I'm not saying that my mother's saying go with Grossman, made him go with Grossman. It didn't hurt.
Yeah.
Like everything else. But, we were there when that happened as well. So,
Peter, we've got to get you on again because I in my head, I've got about 2 or 3 more hours of questions to ask, and we've only got 2 minutes left. I need to remind people, if you're enjoying these stories, you're like Bob Dylan, you want to get the real deal on his first days in New York, get Peter Mackenzie's book, On a Couch, and 50 cents a day. Let me ask you real quick, Peter.
Let me just say this.
Yeah.
Actual title is Bob Dylan, On the Couch, and 50 cents a day.
There you go.
And it's available on Amazon and also Apple eBooks. You can go there if you don't like Amazon. So you just go there, you type in the title when you go to Amazon, or type in my name, you get there. And the good thing is, because they sample part of the book, you'll get to see the complete description of what it is. You'll get to read all the reviews, and it's gotten some pretty good reviews. I must say I was surprised. I'm not surprised, but it's always nice to see when something you do gets praise. And you can read the introduction and the first 2 chapters. That'll really give you a sense of what the entire book is about. And then you go from there. That's when you make your decision. Do you want to read the rest of it? Anyway, that's what I have to say about that. So I'll be quiet now. Your turn.
Beautiful. One more quick question before we let you go, and we will have you on again. What's your favorite Bob Dylan song?
Well, back then, obviously it depends on which day I listen to it, but back then, it basically, I think, was his, frankly, his first masterpiece, was Let Me Die in My Footsteps. I love that song. I couldn't listen to it enough. When he played it, it was just amazing to me. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Or it's either I Will Not Go Down Under the Ground or Let Me Die in My Footsteps. I actually, believe it or not, have the original manuscript for that, and it's now in the possession of one of the greatest guys that I know, Bill Pagel.
It's my old landlord. I just talked to him last week. Peter Mackenzie, we got to run. We're going to have you on again. Everybody out there in listening land, get Dylan on a couch at 50 cents a day. Thank you so much, Peter. Have a beautiful day.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You're listening to Stars Over the Prairie with Paul Metsa right here on KDAL.
Tate Whittington, who has just been finishing up working on a documentary on Kane's Ballroom, which is 101 years old this year, and he's on the line with a buddy of his. Tate, how are you this morning?
Paul, how are you? Greetings from Tulsa.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you've got your buddy with you today?
I do. I've got Garrett Weindorf, my producer partner, here with me.
Hey, Paul.
Hi, Garrett. Nice to meet you. Boy, I'll tell you what.
Nice to meet you.
For a man like myself that loves music, loves history, loves it all, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed the two trailers I've seen of the documentary we're working on about Kane's Ballroom. Now, what's the working title for the project right now?
Well, the working title is Raising Kane, The History of Kane's Ballroom.
But that's old news, Paul. It's all changed now. It's
that's we got the Raising Kane's chicken fingers here and stuff now. This project starts for a number of years, and that has been the working title. Actually, is what it has been, and I thought that was going to be the title of the film, but we haven't really even told anyone this yet. We're actually looking at rebranding here really soon. We're rebranding the film, and especially with now that it's Kane's is 100 years old, just past 100 years old. I don't really want to reveal the new name yet, but
he doesn't want to reveal it, Paul.
That's all right.
Everybody's got their price, so
yeah.
You know that you're the first to know publicly.
With broken news with you.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's a beautiful thing. Say, so tell us, when did you start working on the documentary? Who came up with the idea, and when did you actually start filming?
Yeah, it's Tate here. I came up with the idea, I think it was around 2009. I was living in Los Angeles. I just moved back about 6 years ago now. I was away for about 25 years, and mainly California and New York for a year. But the last 18 years I was away was in Los Angeles. And I kind of came up with the idea. I'd been working in the film industry, and just, it was worked on a lot of other people's films and different projects, and wanted to, it was just time to do something of my own. So it was about 2009, I guess, when I came up with the idea. And that was actually before, nowadays there's, all sorts of venues have documentaries or films about them. Back then, that wasn't the case. A buddy of mine actually was wanting to send in, this is when you had to send in a DVD, of your project, your film to a festival. And he's like, oh man, he's like, we're down to the wire. He's like, a friend was up in Portland. He was like, hey, can I email you a DVD? If you can you deliver it and drop it off tomorrow in Beverly Hills for this film festival? And I was like, sure, dude. And so he sent it on. He's like, I'm sending you an extra one for you to check out yourself. He did the audio on it. And that was the impetus for the project. I was wanting to do something of my own, and then I watched this film that my buddy sent that he had worked on. He had me drop off for the festival submission for him. And it was about, I don't even remember the name of the place, but it was about a music venue down in Mexico. And whenever I was in, like I said, right around that time, I was thinking of wanting to start a project of my own. And I was like, holy cow. I was like, as soon as I watched that, it came to me. I was like, Kane's Ballroom has so much more history than this place.
Right.
And it's like, it needs to be shared. And it just hit me. That's because I grew up at Kane's, that was where I fell in love with live music. The same with Garrett here. Yeah. Garrett's grandparents even, I think, met. Where did they meet there?
Yeah.
That's a story that so many people have. Our grandparents met there, or whatever, parents met there, or, Garrett and I have been working together across the street now. I told you about the OK Pop Museum there.
Which I want to hear more about, too.
Oklahoma Historical Society across the street from Kane's. It's still...
What's that, Paul?
I said I'd love to hear more about the Historical Society, but let's talk a little bit more about Kane's. And then I didn't have time to go down. You offered...
That's where Garrett and I were both working together at OK Pop, and that's where we were working together in the production in the productions department. Garrett was head of productions, and he comes from a television background where he's won some Emmys and things. He's a real talented producer.
Handsome, too.
Handsome as the day is long.
But yeah, we met over there. But I've been following Tate for a while on social media, and I wanted to be his buddy just because we're into the same stuff. And you know, I'd always kind of dreamed of doing something with Canes also because I love the place like he does.
So it was just really a match made in heaven. I feel that we met, and he's the perfect person to help get this thing over the finish line.
So your visit the other day, was that your first time at Canes?
Yeah, my first time to Tulsa, and I'm coming back because it is the Magic City.
Oh, man, it's great, isn't it?
That's the name of our production company, too, Magic City Pictures.
Tell your friends, but don't tell too many, because we don't want it to get blown up here, you know what I mean?
Hey,
you know what? I'm so happy that was just a really special show that you played at, too. That was incredible. So many great guests, and
yeah, I'm still pissed I didn't get to go. Tate weaseled his way in somehow.
Well, Tate and I hung a little bit out. In fact, he's going to send me some photos he took. You know, it was funny when I was talking to Tate Garrett at Canes, and of course you walk in and I've heard about Canes, for 4 decades, then actually walk in. It's like people that come to Minneapolis that's heard about First Avenue. And when they finally walk in, you can feel the history and those ghosts vibrating off the walls. I felt the same thing when I walked in at Canes, and I was talking to Tate, and I said, I could just imagine the number of shit kickers and fights that had taken place in the stands for it. Because people have been killed in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, it's an amazing place. It really has you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's almost like a sacred vibe when you go in there. You can tell that something special has happened there.
It is. It is really like a living, breathing museum.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing. We're lucky to have it here, and we're really grateful that the stewards of it over the years have kept it going, because it easily could have been demolished like so many of the historic buildings here in town, especially when they put the highway in right next to it, But
we're looking at a picture right now. The highway actually comes about 10, 12 feet from the building.
But, fortunately, all these people, chiefly among them, Larry Schaefer, who had the place from the 70s until 2000, and then now the Rogers family, who have done an incredible restoration job on it and really taken the place to the next level. It's amazing what they've done with it, and they really love it just as much as we do, and are giving it the kind of love it deserves and making sure it'll be around for another 100 years. Yeah. So we're really, we're just so grateful to all those people to keep it up and going and making amazing stuff.
Well, let's talk about both. I got Garrett and Tate Wittenberg on the line. Let's talk about, you guys grew up in Tulsa. Tell us about some of your favorite shows at Canes Ballroom.
Oh, man, I'm starting.
Let Garrett
Well, I'm a musician, too, and I play everything, but I love playing keys most. I'm a big Leon Russell fan.
Sure.
And so I grew up going and watching him at a couple places in town, but namely the Canes. And, the way the bathrooms used to be before the remodel, they were these little rinky-dink, nasty little bar bathrooms on either side of the stage.
Troughs.
Yeah, literally, they had the troughs, in the bathroom. And so I'd go up there, and Leon would be on the sort of right side of the stage if you're facing the stage, and you had to kind of go behind him to go to the bathroom, to the men's room. And so I'd go up there and kind of take my time getting to the bathroom so I could stand behind him for a little bit longer and watch his hands on the keys. It's just incredible, because his left hand, both of his hands, but his left hand, just crazy, and I learned a lot about piano playing just from sitting there watching him, and oh shit, look at this guy. Yeah. Anyway,
about the killer, I think you could be seen in that video. I think your front row, the Jerry Lee Lewis show.
Yeah, I got fortunate enough to see. I waited one day. I think I blew off school. I was in high school, I think, or college or something. I blew off school and went to see Jerry Lee, massive Jerry Lee fan. And this was in the late 90s. And David Souders, who was working with Larry Schaefer at the time, Diabolical Productions, they helped bring that show. And he let me inside, and he let me wait. So I got front row for Jerry Lee. And it was wild, man. It was, Jerry Lee was old as sin, but it was still an incredible show. And Dr. Nick was there. Elvis's...
really?
Dr. Field.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I got to see also Little Richard around that same time. I was also front and center. I got one of the only autographs Little Richard gave out. And I still drink only orange Gatorade because that's what Little Richard drank.
Yeah. Oh, this is fantastic.
So many memories. We'll see.
And
so many shows.
Of my favorites, I think it was 1989, The Call from Oklahoma was
wow.
what blew me away there. That was one of my favorite first shows at Cain's. The band Ministry, Al Jorgensen, that was still to this day. The Cage Tour, 1990.
Cage Tour.
Just blew my mind. But, so many other shows there, like Wilco a million times,
Well, the Green Day, recently, after the pandemic kind of caused them to hit pause on everything like everybody else in the world, they reopened, and the kind of big reopening celebration almost was Green Day at Cain's.
That really happened by happenstance, and that they were in town rehearsing for their world tour, big tour at the BOK Center.
Yeah, the big arena down the way.
But then they knew of Cain's, like Billy Joe Armstrong, the lead singer, songwriter, guitar player.
For more than 80 years, KDAL 103.9, W28 FBFM, and 610 KDAL Duluth Superior, a Midwest communication station. KDAL. Live, it Stars Over the Prairie with 8-time Minnesota Music Award-winning songwriter, musician, author, and historian, Paul Metsa. Check out previous show podcasts at KDAL610.com. Now, here's Paul Metsa.
My next guest is a man who wrote for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune for years. There's a great story on how we met in the early 1990s, and he will correct me with the dates. I was down at my local watering hole, Eli's Bar down on 12th and Hennepin, and there was this great weekly was 5 pieces, 5 weeks in a row, that this writer by the name of John Tevlin was writing about his wife, Ellen, who's in a coma, how she got in a coma, and then all of her struggles being in the hospital in a coma. And then in the 5th episode, 5 weeks later, she miraculously comes out of this coma. And I had been following this writer for 5 weeks. So I'm sitting at the bar having my martini, Tito's, dry, straight up, 1 olive, and sit next to this guy. And I was telling him about this incredible series of articles I just finished in the Star-Tribune. And I'd seen him in the bar before. We never really chatted. And I said, yeah. He said, you really got to check it out. It's just phenomenal writing. And he said, I wrote that. And with that, I would like to introduce you to the man that said that to me, the great John Tevlin. Johnny, how are you this morning?
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Good. Do you remember when we met?
Yes, I do. And it's funny, I hear your resume on there with author and musician and everything, and I just knew you as that guy at the bar.
I wear several hats in this world, John
You do,
Tevlin.
yes, a lot of hats, more hats than most.
Well, John and I have gotten to be very good friends over the years. We're going to hear his whole story, but he recently came out of retirement to write an article about his experience with ketamine therapy and how it helped pull him out of depression after the death of his lovely wife, Ellen, who I also got to know and was very good friends with. And we're going to hear more about that. But, John, let's go back to that time we were on the bar stool with our good buddy, the late, great Jimmy Reggae, the bartender,
Indeed.
of course, Eddie Nagel, who was the proprietor. And what year was that 5-week?
It was actually around 2001, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think 2000 is when she went into the coma, and I think by the time I finished the story, and it was 5 parts, I think it might have been 2001.
Let's go back a little bit before, and I want you to tell my listeners about that article because it was so powerful. But you grew up, you went to high school with none other than Prince.
Right, I did. Minneapolis Central for just 1 year.
Yeah.
But he was there. He was in my geometry class and played football for a short while. I was out against him as I played wide receiver, and so did he. And someone, the first day of practice, looked at me and said, "See that kid over there? He's a genius."
Huh.
And I always like to joke that I beat out Prince, that loser. What I found out is that he quit football before school started because he was putting out his first album.
Wow. Yeah.
So
wow.
I didn't feel so proud of myself after that.
When my band, Cats Under the Stars, we're starting to do our first demo tape at Moon Sound. Now, Chris Moon had a little recording studio on 28th and DuPont, and he was recording some bands from the north side, including Grand Central. I believe that was the name of Prince's high school band.
Yes, it was, yeah.
And he really knew this young Prince Rogers Nelson was really the prime mover and the huge talent in the band, which actually had quite a few other great players that went on to make quite names for themselves. So back then, I believe we literally painted part of his studio for free studio time to do Cats Under the Stars' first 3-song demo. And there would be this young black guy, and I remember him twirling his keys in a black leather jacket, big fro, waiting for these 3 guys to get the hell out of the studio so he could go in because Chris would throw him the keys and let Prince there have his way, where Prince really learned all of his studio chops from just a young age.
Yeah, and at Central, I would come in from football practice, and he would be in the music room because they gave him the keys to the music room at Central, and he would be in there writing music.
Wow.
And he'd be playing, you could hear him playing piano or guitar or whatever it was as we went to be done with football practice. So it was a pretty amazing time.
What year did you guys graduate?
It would have been 76.
Okay.
I ended up moving up north with my parents, but so I didn't graduate from Central, but I went there my first year.
Did you ever play hoops against him?
No, I did not.
Okay.
No. I heard he was pretty good. Short, but very fast.
Yeah, oh, no. I just saw a great thing online with Kevin Garnett.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, just bragging about how what a hoops player Prince was. Doesn't surprise me. Very courted guy. Anybody that's seen him in concert over the years ago, my God.
Great athlete.
Great
yes, he was.
athlete all the way around. Well, let's talk about John Tevlin. How you got into journalism, and I'm going to brag a little bit. Not only I want to brag about our friendship. In fact, you were up. I've got a steady Wednesday night gig here in Duluth at the Blackwater Lounge every Wednesday from 6 to 8, and I was so happy to see you and your gal Irene showed up about 6 weeks ago. It was such a great time to. Great gig and really nice to see you. But when did you start getting into journalism, and when did you decide that was going to be your profession?
It was funny. I went to St. Cloud State my first year and signed up as a psychology major, and then saw an ad for a trip to London where you could go and study abroad in London. It was kind of a reciprocal deal.
Because up to then, John Tevlin, you were doing most of your studying at the red carpet.
Yes, I was.
I think that bar is still there.
Wednesdays and Thirsty Thursdays were big on my schedule.
Beautiful.
And so that was, and it's kind of why I went to St. Cloud State. It was known as a party school.
Next to Mankato State, one of the biggest party schools in the country. God bless them all.
Exactly.
God bless them all.
So I went to London on this trip, and this was my sophomore year. And so I studied at the University of London and had professors from University of London and from Oxford. So it was a terrific experience. And unlike the United States, where you do multiple choice tests and things like that, everything is written in England. You write an essay for every class.
Right.
So I found out that I was a pretty good writer. And so I wrote my final project for the year and got a better grade on it than I'd ever gotten in college. And so the professor, who was from Oxford, called me aside, and he said, this is the best thing that's been handed in this year. And he said, have you ever thought about being a journalist? And I said, not really. And he said, I think you should.
Wow.
So I went back to University of Minnesota and transferred to the U and went into the journalism program.
Wow.
And it worked out fairly well for me. So.
Now, I've been reading, when I was in 5th grade, we had a teacher that made sure we all read the daily newspaper. Back then, growing up on the Iron Range, was the Duluth News Tribune. And I remember, I was a big sports guy back then. There was a guy named Bruce Bennett, was just incredible. Those guys that, there was a handful of columnists that we both know in Minneapolis that were not only great sports journalists, but were just great journalists, and they happen to apply their great journalistic artistry through sports. So I've been a lifetime newspaper reader. And when I moved to Minneapolis in 1978, I remember reading Jim Klobuchar, Larry Batson. There was still a little bit of Will Jones around. Who were some of your Twin Cities journalistic heroes that you remember now that you paid attention to as you were coming of age as a young journalist?
Those would have been the ones probably. And I also read a lot of Jimmy Breslin from New York.
Oh, I love Jimmy Breslin.
And so he was my role model in doing this. And as I thought about it later, I had the collections of columns from all these great columnists around the country. When I was in college, and my roommate, pointed it out later, he said, "You were thinking about this forever."
Huh.
And so I had all the top columnists in the country. I had all their collections, and I read them repeatedly. And finally became something that I got to do. First, in my first column, I wrote for the Rochester Post-Bulletin.
Sure, great newspaper.
And then City Pages hired me, and so I moved up to the Twin Cities, did the part-time gig with City Pages, and that was about the time that my wife and I started getting serious, and she had the better job, so I moved to the Twin Cities, and she helped support me for the next 10 or 15 years while I freelanced and wrote for City Pages and then The Reader.
Well, let's talk about Ellen. I had the pleasure of meeting her. Of course, was introduced to her by that 5-part pieces you were writing for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. But let's talk about Ellen because, John Tevlin, I love you dearly, but she was truly your better half.
She was. Everybody says that. So I'm used to it, and I outkicked my coverage, and she was something else. Very successful in business. She worked for nonprofits. She was on the leadership team of several large nonprofits in the Twin Cities, and was very well known. Kind of a pioneer because most of the fundraisers and communications people were men at the time, and she was one of the first women to really be a top fundraiser. So they always like to have men go in to talk to the Carl Pohlads and stuff to get money out of them. But Ellen was feisty enough where she could walk in and say, "This is why you need to give me $5 million." So she was very good at it. She was very confident in herself.
And she was just a delight. And it's a beautiful woman and delightful. So what year did you guys get married?
Well, we were married 36 years ago, so you do the math.
Wow.
So, we lasted 35 years.
That's incredible. Let's talk a little bit about... Go ahead. What were you saying?
She passed away shortly after our 35th anniversary, which would have been last April 18th.
And I was honored to read a poem at her memorial service at the Women's Club. I was a big honor for me, John Tevlin. Let's go back to that article you wrote and talk about the history of how she fell into that coma, and your 5-piece, just incredible episodic writing for the Star Tribune about that whole predicament.
Yeah, she had just gone in for simple surgery. She had broken an ankle, and she went in for ankle surgery. And they kept her overnight, as they often do with her, because she had, type 1 diabetes, and she had a lot of issues regarding that. And so at some point, they believe that she probably aspirated from the anesthetic and maybe swallowed some vomit back in, and it got into her lungs. And so it just spread throughout her lungs and made her unable to breathe.
Wow.
And so she went they put her into a drug-induced coma in hopes that the lungs would heal. And it was a disease that I'd never heard of called ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. And it's bad when they call it a syndrome. That means they don't know anything about it.
Right.
Because it's not a disease or anything. It's a syndrome. That means they absolutely know nothing. And so she had a better than average chance of surviving it because she was young at the time, but she did have all these other medical issues that were starting even back then.
So tell us about, because it's been, now almost 25 years since. 24 years. So tell us about how you started writing about it. I mean, that's pretty confessional writing, right? About as confessional as it gets.
It is.
What?
Well, when I went through it, and people were experiencing this with me because people would come to the hospital, and I had a journal there that I had people write in, and she was in a coma for a month. And so it seemed like 6 months. It was so long because every day it was up and down. She was teetering on the edge of death for many, many days and weeks. And so people would come and they would make entries in the journal, which helped me later on to write about it. But they ultimately tried an experimental gas at the time. Now it's used quite commonly. It's called nitric acid. I believe you can even buy it in a can or aerosol form. But it helps open the blood vessels in your body. And so it was kind of a last ditch attempt. They had given her last rites.
Wow.
They had asked if they could try this. And so I sat down with a bunch of lawyers and doctors, and I said yes. There was really no choice at the time because her oxygen saturation was in the 70s, which is, you're not going to live very long.
Right.
And they were actually surprised because they expected by then that she probably had some brain damage. But we tried the nitric oxide, and the whole family was there when it happened. And I asked the pulmonologist, I said, how long does it take when we know? And he said, 5 minutes. He said, we'll know if it's going to work or not. And he came out and pumped his fist, came out of there, and he said, yeah, her sats are back up into the 90s.
Wow.
And so they were able to just keep her alive, barely, and then they would turn her, the bed would turn over so she'd be face down, and they'd move her lungs around and things like that. It was a very intensive process, but in the end, they kind of slowly were able to wake her up. And I remember walking in one day and just saw her sitting up, and she looked at me in the bed, and I couldn't believe it. And the two interns that had been working on her case were standing at the bedside, and they were both crying.
Wow.
Because they did not, yes. And it's interesting because one of them, it made her really want to go into this career. The other one, it really made her not want to go into this career.
Right.
Because it was too emotional for her.
Oh, for sure.
And so, and I went over to the bed, and I showed her a calendar, and I said, you came in here. I flipped the month over, and I said, it's this day right now. And she looked at me, and she was completely shocked. So she was out the whole time. And so I worked through it. And one point, or shortly after that, after she survived and got back home, friends started saying, you should really write about this. This is pretty remarkable. And so I finally kind of got persuaded to make a pitch to the editors, and he read my outline on it, and he said, take 2 or 3 months off and just write about this. And so I went back and talked to the nurses that were had taken care of her. And one of them, Kathy, it was her name, sat down with me and went through the records to see what happened on what day and what they were doing and what they were writing. And as I found out, they also write, besides all the stuff they do to keep her alive, they keep a journal of the behavior of the family members. So we got to one point, and she goes, we're going to skip over this. And I said, no, we're not. And it was uncanny how much she had figured out about me and about Ellen's sisters and who was using whom for information. And it was not flattering at all.
Right.
We were a mess. And I had at one point told them to kick out her sisters.
Wow.
Kick them out of the hospital. So I had her copy that part of it off, and I kept it in my billfold for years, just in case I ever needed it.
No, I totally get it. When my father was in a coma, right around the corner here at St. Mary's for about 6 weeks. In what years was that? I believe the early 2000s, 2002, I believe. As you know, for those, so many of us never really spent a lot of time, thank God, in hospitals. And so when you have a family member, and especially in someone in a coma, and there's really no, you really don't know where it could go. And, of course, you can always assume the worst. But I remember when he was on the 7th floor at St. Mary's, which was intensive care, he was in great hands. And they had such great care. All the nurses and doctors go down to the 6th floor. It's a totally different story. You're on your own.
Right.
And I remember a friend of mine said, get to know the chaplain. Get to know the chaplain, because that's going to be your connection to your medical help. But I remember one time, John, when Dad showed a little bit of improvement, and we took him down to the 6th floor, but he could barely talk. I had to feed him, and he was in his wheelchair. And I was literally asking the hippie janitor, I'm going, I can't get any really beat on what's going on with my dad. I said, you work here every day. I said, what do you think? But you understand what I'm talking about, John, right?
Yes, exactly, yes. And it's kind of a mystery, and they keep things from you, and they keep things from other people. But they do an amazing job, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to write about it, is to thank the people at Abbott Hospital, and it was a whole team of people that worked to keep her alive. And years later, I would be at the hospital on another thing with Ellen, and I'd be walking down the hall, and someone would stop me and say, hey, I read that story, and I was one of the ones who helped flip your wife.
Wow.
The nurse say that, yes.
Wow.
I had someone actually at Eli's bar. I looked over, and I saw a table full of nurses, and I saw that a couple of them had been working with Ellen, and I recognized him. So I called Jimmy over, and I said, see that table in the corner? I got their meals.
Well, nice for you, John
Devlin. I was able to give a little bit back to him.
Oh, good for you. Well, we're going to hear the story. We're coming up on a break with John Tevlin, how he wrote about his recent experience to get out of depression with ketamine therapy. And he just wrote an article, took him out of retirement, about the whole process for the Star Tribune. So we'll be back with John until the rest of the hour on Stars Over the Prairie. So stay tuned.
I'm Joe, and I had Z LASIK at Weiss Eye Center. The funny thing is I absolutely hated buying a contact solution because I thought it was such a racket having to spend $15 on a bottle of contact solution. And that's just one thing, is just not having to buy that stuff anymore, or glasses or anything like that. For me, it's mainly just I like to hunt and fish and everything, and not having to bring that stuff along, especially in the winter when I go ice fishing and stuff. It gets a pain when I get to the end of the day taking my contacts out, and then if a rattle reel goes off in the middle of the night, I'm fumbling for my glasses to go and try and catch a fish.
Weiss Eye Center is the only clinic to offer blade-free Z LASIK in the Northland. To find out more and to arrange your free consultation, call 218-625-1917 today or visit weisseyecenter.com for more information. Weiss Eye Center. See the best.
Chum's 20th Annual Rhubarb Festival is taking place on Saturday, June 28th. Through all things rhubarb, the Rhubarb Festival raises money for Chum and its services, supporting people in Duluth who are experiencing homelessness. This includes rhubarb refreshments, such as pies, ice cream, burritos, and brats, music and entertainment, and rhubarb-themed activities for the whole family to enjoy. The festival is from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. on June 28th at Asbury United Methodist Church in West Duluth. For more information, please visit Chum's website at chumduluth.org/rhubarb.
Gray Wolf Lodge, located on gorgeous Pelican Lake in beautiful Orr, is the great getaway in northern Minnesota. Featuring affordable, modernized cabins that rent by the week or even a few days, Gray Wolf Lodge is your place to treat the family or just yourself for a relaxing time away from it all. With great fishing, yoga classes, massage, boat rentals, a sandy beach, a common gathering area with a fire pit, and the gorgeous and rustic Gray Wolf Lodge, hosts John and Carol have thought of everything for your unforgettable stay. Give them a call at 1-800-840-9653 or go to graywolflodge.com to see all that they have to offer. Gray Wolf Lodge, your home away from home in the North Woods.
If you're looking for a great hang in downtown Duluth, I highly suggest Carmody's Irish Pub. They're located at 308 East Superior Street, open Tuesday through Sunday. The host and hostess are Eddie and Liz. Eddie is a retired Chicago cop. If he happens to be in the club when you're there, talk to him. He's got more stories than I do. They've also got a great jam session every Tuesday night from 8 to 11 with Bruce Woodman. So if you're a musician, tried and true, that has been out there playing and just want to go try out some new stuff, go down and hang out with Bruce and the crew. Or if you're just up and coming, bring your horn or your stringed instrument or just want to sing. Go sit in with Bruce Woodman every Tuesday night at Carmody's Pub, 308 East Superior Street.
You're invited to the Great Lakes Candy Kitchen, open for another season for all your candy pleasure. They're located on Scenic Highway 61, 10 miles north of Duluth in Knife River. They're third and fourth generation candy makers using traditional copper kettles to make their caramels, fudge brittles, and chocolate-dipped hot air. When you visit Great Lakes Candy Kitchen, be sure and try their famous nutty ice cream bar. Tell them you heard it on Stars Over the Prairie. Great Lakes Candy Kitchen, located just 10 miles north of Duluth in Knife River.
River City Records and Books, voted best record store of 2023 in the Twin Ports by the Duluth Reader, has in stock thousands of new and used vinyl records, from classic rock to punk, grunge, and metal, to hip-hop, rap, and jazz, reggae, and dub. Thousands of books, CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray, and VHS. Also a large selection of cassettes, comic books, and music magazines. Stop in and see them at 1814 West Superior Street in the friendly Lincoln Park Craft District. Open 9 to 7, 7 days a week.
Every day deserves a superior beer. Earth Rider Brewery's decorated brewers hand-select hops that lend citrus notes to the crisp and easy-drinking Superior Pale Ale. Visit Earth Rider Brewery's Cedar Lounge Taproom on the Working Harbor in Superior for their award-winning flagship and seasonal brews on tap and to go. To find out much more about Earth Rider Brewery events, join the mailing list and locate Earth Rider Beer near you at earthrider.beer. Hold fast.
It Stars Over the Prairie with 8-time Minnesota Music Award winner Paul Metsa.
Welcome back to Stars Over the Prairie. This is your host, Paul Metsa. We've got a little psychedelic music there playing in the background because you are going to hear one hell of a story by my guest, John Tevlin. If you just checked in, John was a longtime writer for the Star Tribune. We've known each other for almost 25 years. He was recently pulled out of retirement to write an article that my friend Sonny Earl sent me. He's a big fan of John, says you got to read Tevlin's back in print. And it was an article about John's recent experience after the loss of his wife Ellen a little over a year and a half ago. He went into a deep depression. He turned to brand new ketamine therapy to deal with it and had really surprising and positive results. So, John, let's go back a little bit and talk about first of all, tell us about that great last trip that Ellen was advised not to take. This speaks a lot to her character.
It does, and I did not want to go. She early in the year last year, in January, she knew that she was getting worse. She was on dialysis by that time, so 3 days a week she had to go in, and just not good health overall. Sometimes using oxygen, often using a wheelchair or a scooter to get around. And she said, I have two things I want to do before I die. I want to redo the kitchen for you because you won't do it. And she was right. And she said, and I want to go to Savannah. I really never knew why she wanted to go to Savannah. She'd been there for like one night, and she just liked it.
Right.
And so we booked a house and went to Savannah. She was in the hospital with pneumonia, and we were supposed to leave in 2 days, and I looked at the doctor, and I said, we shouldn't go on this trip, right? You know, thinking that the doctor's going to back me up. And the doctor looked at Ellen and said, if I told you that you could die on this trip, would you still go? And she said, yes. So the doctor looked at me and said, I think you should go.
Wow.
So we went, and we had a really good time. I booked 2 months. She lasted about 6 weeks. And then just one day, I picked her up from dialysis. Meanwhile, we had gone to all the nicest restaurants. She had a list of things she wanted to do. We'd gone to a couple of islands. We visited a friend of mine who's a writer, and he lives on Edisto Island, South Carolina, and we'd stayed with them. And just had a wonderful time. And her health was pretty good that whole time. She still went to dialysis 3 days a week in Savannah. And then one day I picked her up, and they just said, you know, she's not doing very well. I think you should take her to ER.
Wow.
And so I did, and after 2 or 3 days there, the doctor just said, you're not getting any better. And so she said, you know what then? She says, I'm done with this. She said, I've had a great life. I want you to take everything off. You know, she said, do you want your oxygen off? And she said, yes.
Wow.
She said, I want to be able to talk to my husband. And so they took it off, and they took all the IVs out of her arm and everything, and then she said, and where's the morphine? So
yeah, right.
They gave her a big shot of morphine, and I said, you know, how long is it going to take? And they said, we don't know, but you'll notice her oxygen slowly dwindling. And that's exactly what happened. I sat with her through the night, and when the sun came up in the morning, I looked up and saw her oxygen go from 92. Slowly, the needle dipped down to 77. She opened her eyes for like 1 second, looked at me, and then closed her eyes again.
Wow.
And passed away. So,
man, that is...
So we were down in Savannah at the time, and the doctor said, what are you going to do? I said, well, we've talked about this. I'm going to have her cremated, and I'm going to send her home.
Wow.
And she said, wow, she planned this down to the minute. And I said, well, she said 2 nights ago, she asked me if we'd gone to all the restaurants that we'd had on our list. She asked me if we'd gone to all the sites that we wanted to see. And I said, yes. And she said, okay, good.
Wow.
So,
well, I got to ask you, on behalf of Ellen, did you ever get the kitchen done?
I did. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Good for you. No, I had to.
I told the construction people, I said, I'm just going to be honest. My wife's dying, and she wants it before she goes.
Oh, God.
And they got it done. And so when she did die, I sent them a note and said, I just want to thank you again for being so fast on getting that kitchen done. My wife just passed away, and the builders sent a big bouquet of flowers.
Oh,
really
God
sweet.
bless them. God bless Ellen. God bless you. I've kind of a little tear in my eye reliving this because, you and I have got to be close to friends for the years, so I was kind of tracking this whole journey. And but it's really such an inspirational story, both the first coma in the early 2000s, her last days on this earth, her last trip. I mean, what a great way to remember her. And and you're such a great.
We should all be so lucky to go like that,
Absolutely, and know that there is an end. I mean, all of us live like we're going to live forever, and but as we know, that is not the case. Now, so John, when did? I'm sure you had the strength to get through getting her cremated, getting her body back.
Right.
When did
planning the ceremony, I think, too, that I knew that I had something to do, and so I got through that, and there were people around helping me, and so I planned that. Ellen had picked the songs before she passed, and she picked Tom Petty's I Won't Back Down, and to close the ceremony, it was Wild Thing.
I remember, and it was everybody sang along to that one.
Everybody sang along, yeah, and so it was really beautiful. But it was after that point, people start to disappear from your life.
Sure.
And you're all alone at home. And I would walk down the hallway and burst into tears, knowing that when I opened the door, there'd be nobody there.
Right.
And we did have a dog at the time. His name was Trouble.
I knew Trouble well. I loved Trouble.
Yeah, he was a great companion. But one of the things before Ellen died, I said, "What do you want me to do when you're gone?" And she said, "I want you to travel." And she said, "I think you should probably go to Spain and Portugal." She says, "Because you really liked Portugal and we were there." And she said, "And you really like Latin women. And so maybe you can meet somebody." So she was trying to set me up.
God,
even before
what a woman.
She passed
what
away.
a woman.
And so I did that trip, and it was okay, but I was very lonely, cried a lot during the trip. Came back, still tried to travel, went to Puerto Rico, and was just miserable. I just was all alone, and I never felt more alone. So I came back, and I was really low. I was really depressed. It was just repetitive thoughts about her death and about her illness that I could not get out of my head. And that's what they call them, ruminations. And I had tried drugs, standard depression drugs, and I tried psychotherapy. And so I was doing both at the time, but it got worse and worse, actually. I thought it was going to get better. I went to a grief group that I met weekly with, and it just wasn't working. And so I went to the doctor for an annual physical, and they always hand you one of those sheets to fill out about your mental health.
Right.
And you mark it off, and you mark, how you're feeling from good to crappy. And the doctor took a look at it, and she looked at me, and she said, "Do you own a gun?"
Wow.
And I said, "No, but I can get one in an hour."
Yeah, right.
And she said, "I think you might need to go into the hospital."
Wow.
So I was that depressed. I did still have a sense of humor, because they said, "If you're on your deathbed, is there anything that would give you comfort?" And I said, "Selma Hayek."
Tevlin, you never lost your sense of humor. God bless you.
No, I never did. And so, I had the doctors in the psych ward laughing. But they actually are the ones, when I went there just for a day, I went in there and talked to them, and it was a very weird experience. And they came in and said, with your platform and your abilities, we hope that you will write about this somehow.
Huh.
And this was before I'd thought about ketamine at all. And so I said, Yeah, thank you. That was kind of their remedy for me, was to write about it. It said, because you could help other people. So after that, I realized I had to do something, and I had a happenstance, a conversation with a woman that I roomed with in Bogota, Colombia, way back in the 80s, Pablo Escobar days. And I taught English as a second language down there, and she was my roommate. And she found out that Ellen had died, and she knew I was probably hurting. And so she called me up, and we had lunch. And she told me about going to like a shaman in Colombia and doing psilocybin mushroom tea. And it was after she had a bad breakup with her husband. And so she said, and it really helped her depression, and she wondered if I would consider doing something like that. And I said, well, I'm not ready to go to South America right away. But then I was talking to someone else, and they said, I know a person, I have a friend of mine who has a clinic in Eden Prairie, and they use ketamine because that's been legalized. It had been legalized a couple of years ago to be used in treating depression and particularly PTSD and grief. And grief, it has been very successful. So a lot of first responders and soldiers have used it. And so I went out there, did the interview, and decided probably the alternative of doing nothing was not going to end well. And so I did it, and it was wild.
So walk us through the process.
So at first they did an interview with me and did a physical, make sure I was healthy. He asked about previous drug use, asked if I'd ever used psychedelics before, and I said yes, that I had in college. Asked if I had any bad experiences, and I said, well, I know for sure that you shouldn't take LSD and go to the London Zoo. Because that had been an experience of mine that did not go well, particularly since we got locked into the zoo. At closing time, we couldn't find the exit.
Right.
And they kept announcing the zoo is now closed. Well, of course, the animals know that, and they know that it's feeding time.
Right,
so they go absolutely crazy. They go crazy. And we're running around, and the birds are cawing, and the monkeys are jumping out of their bars. And so that was
and some are real, and some are real monkeys.
Some are monkeys, some are not. So I'd had some experience with it. He said, I think you're a good candidate. And so we did, and I came back in a week or so and went into a nice quiet room, sitting in a big lounge chair like I am right now. I had a blanket and some pillows, and he was with me. He was the doctor in charge. And then I had a psychotherapist who I'd seen about a week before to talk to her through it. So she knew me. And then she accompanied me, and the doctor came in and gave me the shot. And about 2 minutes later, I started feeling all kinds of weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I even said out loud, I said, this is really weird. And I'm a writer, so I'm trying to think of ways to describe it. So I was very frustrated because I said, I can't describe this. I've never seen it before. And so it was mostly colors and patterns, a lot of geometric shapes floating through my eyes. And I had a mask on so I couldn't see, and I had headphones on with like exotic music. So everything that was going on in my head because there was no distractions whatsoever. And so it was all in my head, and I just went on this wild trip. They gave me 2 more shots to keep me under for longer, because the longer you're under, the longer it lasts typically.
Sure.
And so I was tripping for probably 3 hours or so.
Wow.
And then kind of slowly came out of it. And that's when I started talking more, too. And during that time, I was kind of scared at first. There was a moment where I went, oh, no, I shouldn't have done this.
Right.
I think I said aloud, I want to go home.
Yeah.
Well, it was too late. I wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
And so, but at one point I said, are you still here? And the psychotherapist said, yes, I'm right here beside you. And I said, am I still here?
Wow.
And they said, yes, you are. You're still sitting in the chair. Because I had no feeling of my body at all. And then she said, your wife is here too. And I said, I know, I'm holding her hand.
Wow.
And I swear to God, I thought I was holding her hand.
Wow.
Which for me afterwards was worth the price of admission.
Absolutely.
It was so real that I couldn't believe it. And I guess at the time, so I didn't know if I said it aloud or if I was just thinking it. So I asked her, I met with the psychotherapist again 2 days later, and I said, did I say that aloud? And she said, yes, you did. And she said, when you said it, you reached over and held your other hand.
Wow. That's incredible.
So,
I know,
yeah, it was wild.
I know when I have, not as often as I'd like, I have dreams of my mother, and it usually is right before I wake up, and I'll hear her voice, and when I wake up, there's such a peaceful feeling. And she died in 1994 at the age of 64, but we were very, very close. And like I said, for years, all male musicians are mama's boys, and I was certainly one. But that I really believe in that connection. I believe she reaches out. Yes. I believe she's talking to me.
I know for
sure. I said to the psychiatrist or the psychotherapist, she said, I said, I thought that she was there with me, and she said, and we don't know, do we? And I thought that was very interesting. I said, oh, I guess we don't.
So now,
sure felt like it.
Was this the only ride on the ketamine, or did you do it again?
No. So about 3 weeks later, I did a booster, and it was a drip this time. And instead of a psychotherapist sitting next to me, it was the nurse that works at the clinic. So she's very knowledgeable. She does this all the time. And at times she held my hand, and at times I talked to her. Sometimes I didn't talk. But it was very interesting. It was very different. The first time I cried for 3 hours.
Wow.
The whole time. My shirt was wet. My face was all wet. And the second time I didn't cry at all. In fact, I smiled quite a bit. And I guess when there was some music was hitting a crescendo, I kind of put my arms in the air like a victory lap.
Yeah, sure.
And the strangest thing that happened was in the first session, it was all instrumental music. There were no lyrics. And the second time, after a couple songs, I began to hear lyrics. And they were very clear to me, and I could see them scrolling by my eyes, basically. Really? And I thought, this sounds a little familiar, but is this Lionel Richie? I don't know who it is. I don't like Lionel Richie.
Right.
But it was positive messages. It was like, you've seen the darkness, you're coming into the light, various things like that, all kinds of things. And after I came...
But it was just instrumental music, but you were hearing...
I was hearing words.
Really?
Yeah, which I didn't know until I woke up. And also during that time, a very interesting thing, I had just a flash for a couple of seconds, a picture in my mind of Ellen holding hands with the woman I had just begun dating. Her name was Irene.
Crazy.
And they were together holding hands and smiling. And so then when I came down, I asked the doctor, I said, so why did you put words in these songs and not last time? And he looked at me and he said, John, there were no words in the music. Wow. You were making it up. You were telling your subconscious was telling you what you needed to hear. So I got chills on that. So it was, and I noticed the changes after the first one. I woke up at 6 a.m. I got up and I wrote for 2 hours. I went to the gym and I took a friend out for breakfast. And that's something I hadn't done for months, many months, since probably before Ellen died because she'd been so sick.
Sure.
So I was very energized. And the thing I noticed was those ruminations, those hamster wheel of doom, I called it, that you can't get off of. I was off of it like the next day. I didn't have these deep, dark thoughts that I was stuck on and couldn't get out of. They were gone. I still missed Ellen. I still could think about her, but I could say her name without crying, which had been not the case before.
Does the doctor see in your future more ketamine sessions?
There could be. He had suggested maybe there would be 5, but so far now it's been 6 months, maybe, since I actually did the last one. Maybe 4 months. I don't sense the need for it right now.
Huh.
So, and I've talked to people later, afterwards, who said they did it once and never had to go back. Someone just told me yesterday that I was talking to that I guess there's a famous comedian who does a bit on ketamine. He did it 87 times.
Wow. Well, you probably just like the buzz.
I think he just liked the buzz. So, but he did. He also says it changed his life, and I hear that from a lot of people. And it's so strange because it's hard to understand why that would cause you to think differently. But it seems to just open up pathways in your brain that allow you to think differently about things and just look at them in a different light. Like, I don't have to think this every day.
And this,
I don't have to.
You know what? Interesting, John, because I was such a fan, always been a fan of your writing. And so this article that my buddy Sonny Earl sent, that appeared, just a couple of weeks ago in the Star Tribune?
Was it last Sunday, I believe it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this opening the door for more John Tevlin bylines?
We'll see. I enjoy doing it. I think when it's something that I feel strongly about, and of course, when I talked to an editor at the Star Tribune, they said, we can't pay you much, and I said, that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I think people don't know that this is possible, and it might help somebody.
Well, you covered the Metro for years, and I remember getting a phone call from you several years ago about the hotel in my hometown of Virginia, Minnesota, that were hosting swinger parties once a month. And,
yes, they were.
And I love my hometown, but I believe I gave you one of my golden Metsa quotes, and I said
it was beautiful.
When you told
go ahead.
When you told me about the swinger parties once a month, that I believe was bringing in like tens of thousands of dollars that weekend.
It was a big group.
Every month.
They filled the hotel, yeah.
They filled the hotel, and I said, well, when you asked me about it, it would surprise me. I said, but it sounds like it took the virgin out of Virginia.
Exactly. Yeah, it sent the town into a panic at one point when someone figured out that there were people getting together in that hotel that they didn't know about.
Hey, whatever brings money to the Iron Range, I'm all for.
That's right.
John Tevlin, this has been such an incredible conversation, and of course, I always love seeing you or chatting on the phone. I can ask you whatever happened to Trouble? Trouble the dog?
Trouble passed away when I was in Spain.
Oh, okay.
He did. Right the day I left, I was in Madrid, and I got a phone call. I was at the park there in Madrid, sitting there overlooking a beautiful lake, and I got a call from the doctor saying that his back legs had gone out.
Well, I had the
permission to.
Yeah, well, I had the pleasure of meeting Trouble. There was never a dog so aptly named.
Right.
Trouble the dog. Well, Johnny, we're going to wrap it up on this end up in Tiltown.
And by the way, Paul, I'm still dating Irene, who I met right at the time of the ketamine. So it's been 6 months.
Yes, and I dedicated "She Belongs to Me."
She belongs to me.
Her,
yeah.
Which I believe you said had the great line of something about, "But you're a walking antique."
You're a walking antique, and I'm something. Yeah, exactly. And that kind of makes sense, considering that she's a little younger than I am.
Yeah, well, that's okay, Johnny. You're a good antique. So thanks for chatting with us. And,
okay, thanks, Paul.
And I'll look forward to seeing you soon, brother.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Right. Thanks for listening to Stars Over the Prairie. We're on every week from 10 a.m. to noon on KDAL. Go to starsovertheprairie.com to hear podcast. And like my dad used to say, remember to be kind and make someone happy. This is Paul Metsa saying, have a great weekend.
Stars over the prairie tonight, and I wish I could see stars over the prairie.